Spookou's frightening nights of Halloween.
Hello, my dear Frankenfriends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen, and we're rolling right into night 11 of our Frightening Nights of Halloween series. Do not stop. Do not collect your insurance fraud money. This is the choo-choo train of horror, and we stop for no more. Can you tell our writers are just babbling at this point? They've essentially run out of things to say, and it makes me look like an idiot. Standing here in front of you guys, rambling, and oh, you can tell Carl I said that. He doesn't scare me. Yeah, well, you can tell him I said... Sorry about that. Just a friendly little rivalry. Tonight's narrators are Matt Chatter's joining us? He's like only my favorite person in the world. You know he calls me Spook Boo? It's adorable. Oh, I stand this. I totally stand this. Excuse me. Lost my cool there for a second. We've also got a dear, close friend of the channel, Corporate Horror, or as we like to call him, Quaid. You guys may remember him as Cameron from a little short film called I Survived. I just want to take a second to congratulate Quaid on getting married and wish him a very happy future with his wife. Thanks for lending your voice to this collaboration. And our final narrator of the night is the horrific Mr. Hyde. Now, the authors that lent their stories for tonight's episode are certainshadows, MPZ1968, who had another story featured way back in Night 7, Mr. Hyde, TheHorrorHomie, and TheAverage21. Now, let's dive into A Letter to My Husband, written by certainshadows and narrated by the ever-lovely Mad Chatter.
A Letter to My Husband, written by Reddit user certainshadows. I still vividly remember the night that we met. The handsome angle of your jawline, the glimmer in your dark eyes when you smiled, the way you laughed at my clumsy jokes despite my obvious nervousness. I couldn't believe that someone so breathtaking would be drawn to me. I know it likely sounds cliche, but before we began dating, I never knew it was possible for a person to feel such overpowering happiness. Living alongside you was like wandering through a spectacular dream, ripe with joyous moments. My hands trembling as you slid a diamond ring onto my finger, the handwritten vows we exchanged at our wedding, champagne bubbling on my tongue as we celebrated our nuptials. Perfect is an overused word, but it's the only one that can adequately describe the early days of our marriage. Then you changed. In the beginning, I made excuses for you. You worked long hours and were often tired. So what if you sometimes called me cruel names, or angrily tossed the dinner I spent hours preparing into the garbage can, or became livid if I talked to my mother on the phone for more than 2 minutes? I was certain that you didn't mean any of the unkind things that you said, and you were always so apologetic afterwards. I brushed off anyone who expressed concern because they didn't know you like I did. When you demanded that I quit my job, cut everyone else out of my life, and focus solely on you, I'll admit that I was deeply saddened. Still, I complied. I just didn't want to make you mad again. Moving abruptly, without even telling my mother, to a faraway, rural place where I didn't know anyone, and no one knew I existed, cracked my heart in half. The first time your fist connected with my mouth, and I tasted my own blood. You said you were sorry. Eventually, you stopped apologizing. I tried my damnedest to keep you from becoming furious, but all my frightened, tear-soaked efforts were never enough. Eggshells shattered beneath my stumbling feet. Life decayed into ugliness and pain, where there had once been beauty and hope. When I finally summoned enough courage to leave, I didn't get far before you found me. You promised that if I ever tried to flee again, you would simply kill me. You'd violently murder my mother and force me to watch. I knew you weren't lying. That's why I put the drugs in your morning coffee. That's why you woke up chained inside this tiny, windowless, padlocked room, with only a dying flashlight and my letter to keep you company. That's why you'll stay there until I grow bored of jamming food trays through the thin gap at the bottom of the door, and starvation withers you away into nothing. Don't bother screaming, my love. No one else is going to hear you. It's only you and me, just like you wanted. Till death do us part.
Get it, Mad Daddy? Oh, sorry, I should be a little more professional. Here, let's have a word from Mad Chatter about his channel, while I take a moment to collect myself.
Hi everyone, Mad Chatter here. I'd like to thank certainshadows for allowing me to narrate their story. If you enjoyed this narration, be sure to check out my channel for chill streams and chilling stories. I'll hope to see you at the Chatterbox.
Now for certainshadows. You can find their work on their Reddit profile. They primarily post on r/short scary stories when they post to Reddit, but you can also find all of their stories at bycertainshadows.wordpress.com. Be sure to follow the links below to support this amazing author. Our next story of the night is Free Coffee, written by MPZ1968 and narrated by Corporate Horror.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm an avid coffee drinker. I drink coffee 24/7. As a matter of fact, I have a Facebook page with the same name. Check it out. Anyway, I've got a very pleasant, very disturbing story to tell. So here we go. After work, while waiting for my ride, I decided to go over to a local coffee shop and grab a cup of coffee. So I strolled on over and walked in the door up to the counter and ordered a medium coffee with cream and sugar, just how I like it. Don't judge. The cashier lady, not my favorite cashier lady, a beautiful blonde goddess with angelic blue eyes that I'd been crushing on for months. I didn't see her anywhere. As a matter of fact, I didn't see anyone else either. Just me and the new girl. An older lady, kind of creepy, with stringy gray hair, age spots, and these fucked up looking green eyes. Anyway, she went to go make my coffee. Seconds later, she came back with said coffee and placed it on the counter in front of me, rang it up, and told me the price. I, with anticipation of tasting this wonderful concoction that now sits in front of me, whipped out my debit card and proceeded to swipe it through the card reader. Then the most horrific thing happened. Those 4 little words that no one with a debit card ever wants to read came flashing on the screen. Unable to read card. No, this can't be happening. I swiped my card again. Same thing. Again. Same thing. So, the creepy cashier lady says, let me see if I can swipe it through on my side and see if it works. Okay, anything at this point. So she swiped the card through on her side. Same thing. Why, Lord? Why? Meanwhile, I can hear the coffee calling my name. Mike. Mike. Oh, the torture. She then looked at me and says, hey, don't you work at that grocery store across the street? I say yes I do. Here's the disturbing part. She says it's just coffee. You can have it on the house. The angels started singing. All the planets aligned, and for that brief moment, all was right within the world. I got free coffee. Although, I am very appreciative of the gesture from the weird cashier lady. Her comment of it being just coffee disturbed me. It is not just coffee. It is the fuel that it takes to get stuff done. A lifeline for some, a comfort for others. It is never just coffee. "Thank you, ma'am," I said, as I took the cup off the counter, walked back through the door, and back over to where I was sitting, waiting for my ride. I lifted the cup to my mouth, fully prepared to taste this warm sensation. But nothing came out. I'm thinking the lid must be closed, so I lowered the cup down to check it out. No, not closed. Lifted it again, still nothing. I could feel the coffee moving around inside the cup, so I knew it was full. I lowered the cup once again, this time taking off the lid to see what the problem was. What I saw inside almost made me want to stop drinking coffee. Almost. As I lifted the lid, I saw the two beautiful blue eyes of my favorite coffee lady floating in my cup. One must have plugged the hole in the lid, stopped the coffee from coming out. I was in shock, horrified. Then I thought about it. There was no way that beautiful creature would ever go out with the likes of me. But now, I'd always have a piece of her wherever I go. So I took the eyes out of the cup, shaking the coffee off of them, and put them in my pocket. Put the lid back on the cup, and commenced by drinking my coffee. Damn, it was good. My ride finally arrived and drove me home. I placed the eyeballs on my nightstand facing the bed, so every morning I can look into the eyes of my favorite cashier lady, just like I've dreamt of for months. Dreams do come true. Mine did.
Let's just take a moment to hear from Corporate Horror about their channel.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll join me at my channel over at Corporate Horror, where me and a couple of agents are investigating and capturing all things terrifying. I want to thank Barnabas and Spookyou for allowing me to lend my voice for one of these terrifying cases in this wonderful Halloween special. You all stay safe out there, and have a wonderful night.
We've talked about MPZ1968 in this series before, but I'd like to take a second to tell you one more time. There's a lot of content for you to binge on his Reddit. I'm talking series, one-shots, horror, and comedic horror. I mean, there's enough here to keep you reading for years to come. And you can find it all on their Reddit profile, so make sure you give them a follow to keep up with any future stories they come out with. Next up is Victorian Nightmare Part 1. Written and narrated by Mr. Hyde.
My heart is beating a mile a minute as I approach the bathroom door. Just a few minutes ago, I heard the door open, its creaky hinges sounding an eerie notification. The only problem is, I am the only one here. As I make my way up the spiral staircase, I can hear myself breathing. Each creaking step is squeaking underneath my feet, the candlelight flickering in the darkness, illuminating my destination by only a few inches in front of me. I finally make it to the door, and I see that it is indeed closed. With my heart pounding, what did I hear? Earlier, if it wasn't the door. So many questions running through my brain as my breathing intensifies. Instead of opening it, I decide to look through the keyhole. Not a brilliant move since it's dark in there, but to be fair, I'm not exactly thinking clearly at this precise moment. I put the candle up to the hole to try and give myself some light. My eyes adjust to the light as I focus. All I see is a dark, quiet room. No sound, no movement. My breathing begins to return to normal, and that's when the eyes look back out at me through the keyhole. I jump back in fright, falling on my ass, almost dropping the candle onto the old floor. I scooted across the floor and sat my back up against the wall, eyes wide, mouth open. Did I just see that? Who's in my house? Anger started to boil through me. This intruder is not welcome here. I did not invite anyone in. I stood up and went to the door, quickly opening it and bursting inside to confront the intruder. As I moved the candle around the room, I didn't see anyone in the big, empty space. "Hello?" I questioned out with no answer in return. I walked over to the window to look behind the drapes. Nobody there. Closet is next. Still nobody there. Was I imagining it? Am I going mad? Alone in this big house? "I saw you in here," I spoke out again. Again. There was no reply. Convinced that there was nobody in the room, I walked out and closed the door behind me. It creaked as the old hinges moved. I walked down the hall and down the stairs to my study where I was before I heard the noise. I sat down at my desk and finished the letter I was writing to my wife. "My dearest Emily, soon we will be together again. This house is almost completed. The renovations took a little longer than expected. There was much to do. The roof was in dire shape from being vacant for so long. The servants' quarters were badly damaged and in need of a complete redo. And 2 of the 4 washrooms needed a complete overhaul. Tomorrow the electricity will be installed, which will be a welcome addition to the dark house. The study, which is where I am writing this letter to you, is now finished. As the fireplace warms the room, I am filled with warm thoughts knowing that we will be together again soon. I hope all is well with you back home. Say hello to your parents for me. Yours truly, your loving husband." As I put the pen down and I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but get the feeling I was being watched. I sat there quietly in the room for a moment. Nothing but the sound of the crackling fire filled the room. Sleep will not come easily tonight. I was right in thinking that sleep wasn't going to come easy. All through the night I kept hearing weird noises throughout the house. I kept thinking in the back of my mind that the strange intruder was still inside, walking around, trying to steal from me, or worse, murder me in my sleep. The worst feeling, however, was the feeling that I was being watched. There wasn't much illumination in my bedroom either, just the light from the fireplace that eventually dimmed and burned itself out sometime in the early morning. The following morning, an electrical company was arriving. At least I would have more light to help me see and give me some peace of mind. There was still a lot of work to do in the house, and now I'll be able to continue some of my renovations after the sun goes down. The electrical company finally did arrive. 2 men, having already been at the house before to map everything out and already install the lights, went straight to work. In a few hours I had electricity. What a beautiful sight seeing my new mansion lit inside, the walls adorning with elegance and beauty. The big spiral staircase shone with the wooden fixtures installed, the chandelier shining above my head in the foyer. I smiled to myself. A sense of accomplishment came over me. Finally, something to show my new bride. Finally, a home that we will soon share. "That's it, Mr. H," the one electrician said as he walked up to me. "It's a beautiful sight," I replied back, still admiring the beauty. "It sure is," he said back, huffing and puffing like he had just ran a marathon. He handed me the work order form, which I signed and handed back to him. "You okay? You look a little flush," I asked him. "Just in a hurry to get out of this place," he said, taking the form from my hand. "I admire you for taking over this house, but personally I think you're crazy." "In what way?" I inquired back. The second electrician quickly moved past us, almost running outside. We followed him out to the cool autumn air. By the time we made it outside, he was already in the company truck, eyes wide with fear, looking up into the second-story windows. You really don't know the history of this place? The reason why it stayed empty for so long? He gave me a puzzled look. I looked back at him with an inquisitive look. I'm afraid not. I had just relocated here a short time ago. I just recently got married, and while searching for our house, I came across this place. The location is perfect, and so is the price. I'm not surprised, he said rather coldly. There was a honk from the company truck. What is that supposed to mean? I inquired abruptly, startled by the horn. Mr. and Mrs. Glenmore, the occupants, had lived here before. He began telling me the story as he loaded the van. His co-worker sat in the passenger seat impatiently waiting. They had a small child, a little girl named Emma. She was a cute little thing, apparently no more than 3 years old when she got sick. She got the pox. Anyway, the dock was too far away, and the weather was bad that night. Emma's temperature spiked well into the hundreds, so I was told. Mrs. Glenmore was desperate to try and get her temperature down, so she drew a cold bath and put Emma in. He closed the back of the company truck and looked out the house and back at me. The water was too cold for the little Emma, and it sent her body into shock. Eventually, she lost consciousness and eventually died in Mr. Glenmore's arms. Sometime later, Mr. Glenmore actually died of consumption, leaving Mrs. Glenmore a grieving widow. Apparently, she would hold seances to try and talk to her dead child and husband. They said she went mad in this big house all by herself. Eventually, she jumped off the roof and broke her neck. That's quite the story. I looked back at the house. The servants told the story quite vividly. The electrician jumped in the driver's seat of the van. They told all kinds of stories about hauntings and such. Sometimes they said you can even hear little Emma crying. He started the van. Eventually, the servants left in fright. There's been a couple attempts to sell the place, but each time the new owners would put the place back up for sale. He started to drive off and stopped suddenly and looked back at me. Something else you should know, Mr. H. They are buried somewhere behind the house. The van sped off down the driveway after that chilling revelation. I stood for a moment and watched them speed off out of sight. Then I turned and walked into the house. I will have to look for the gravesite behind the house, but first I have some more renovations to finish. That evening I put on my overcoat and stepped into the foggy, cool air and walked around the back of the property to look for the gravesites of the original owners. As I walked, the owls would sound their nightly calls, and a wolf sounded in the distance. The breeze blew through the trees, adding to the eerie scene before me. I finally walked up to the 3 tombstones. Emma Glenmore, 1918 and 1911, Our Little Angel. The second one said, Henry Glenmore, 1876 to 1921. Husband and father. Grace Gilmore was the third one that I looked at. 1881 and 1921. With Emma, it read. As I stood there looking at the gravestones, the words of the electrician went through my mind. They were a young couple struck by tragedy. May they find peace. Suddenly the wind picked up, and I could have sworn I heard someone whisper, "Leave this place." It didn't have to ask me twice. The cool air was chilling my bones, and I needed to sit by the fire. It was a comforting feeling walking back up to the house, seeing the lights on inside. I put my overcoat on the rack stand and made my way to the kitchen to make some hot tea to warm my chilled bones. I entered the kitchen, then stopped in my tracks. All the cupboard doors were open. Curious, as I know I didn't open them. Once again, I was convinced that there was an intruder in the house. This time I went to my gun cabinet and pulled out my Winchester Model 94 rifle. I checked to see if it was loaded and went in search of my unwanted intruder. I made my way slowly up the creaking stairs. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, causing an echoing racket. I froze in my spot, gripping the Winchester tight, my heart pounding in my chest. "He'll hurt Emma," a female's voice cried out. The Winchester was yanked out of my hand. I stood in disbelief as it fell onto the steps. Then, with a strong force, I was pushed down the stairs. I fell backwards down 10 steps, landing hard on my back. In considerable pain, I laid on the floor for a few minutes. I looked up and saw my Winchester still on the steps. Then everything went black. As I awoken with the sound of a little girl crying upstairs, I picked myself up off the floor, still in a considerable amount of pain. I held onto the stairs banister as I made my way up the stairs once again. The Winchester was missing from the spot it had laid. There was more crying, this time with the sound of running water. I made it to the top of the stairs and walked to the bathroom. The crying got louder the closer I got. I flicked on the bathroom light and looked inside, then the crying stopped. The room was empty. Feeling sore and lightheaded, I decided to go lay down. The next morning I woke up to the sunrise and birds chirping. My back pinched as I sat up in bed. I made my way downstairs to make coffee. Still no Winchester on the steps, and all the cupboards were closed. With my coffee in hand, I made my way to the gun cabinet and found my Winchester in the exact spot I took it from the night before. Was I imagining everything last night? My mind playing tricks on me after the conversation with the electrician? My back, maybe it was too sore from all the renovations that I've been working on. I set out to work more around the house. As I hammered the new trim in the upstairs bathroom, in the corner of my eye I saw someone standing off to my right. I quickly looked, and there she was, a little girl dressed in a white flowing dress. I jumped as she startled me. She stood there watching. Then suddenly something fell outside. The shadow quickly went past the window and it landed with a thud outside. I quickly went to the window to look outside, but there was nothing there. I turned to look at the girl and she was also gone. I gave my head a shake, double-checked the ground outside the window, and went back to work. I worked slowly that day, as my body was still in a lot of pain, but I did manage to get a lot accomplished. That night I relaxed in a hot bath. I laid in the hot water relaxing when I heard a little girl laughing. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. I was alone, of course. I sat there listening, and aside from the usual creaks and ticking of the clock, I heard nothing. Sometime later, I was in bed sleeping when I was awoken again by a scream coming from somewhere in the house, and that's when everything started to go crazy. I looked at the clock and it showed 3:05 in the morning. I ran out of my bedroom to see where the scream came from. "She's not breathing!" A whispering scream filled the air. It was coming from the bathroom again. I ran to the room, and just as I was about to enter the room, the door slammed shut with a powerful force in front of me, almost hitting me in the face. I tried to open the door, but it was locked somehow. "You are not welcome here," a male's voice echoed around me. "The hell I'm not. This is my house," I replied sternly, as I kept trying frantically to open the door. "This is not your house. Get out!" The male's voice echoed louder around me. The female crying and wailing continued from the other side of the door. I gave up trying to get into the door and began to walk down the hallway towards the stairs to fetch something to open the door. Suddenly I was pushed from behind forcefully, and I went flying down the stairs, landing on my side with a loud crash. I turned back and to look at the stairs, and I saw this tall, ghostly shape lumbering towards me. He was wearing a black suit and tie. His eyes were pitch black. It lumbered and floated towards me down the stairs in a menacing way. "I told you this is our house and you are not welcome here." It spoke with no facial movements. I tried to get up and stumbled. "I don't want you here to hurt our Emma." He reached out for me. I managed to get on my feet and stumbled towards the door. It opened before I even got to it. The wind picked up from behind me, an ice-cold breeze surrounding me as he came closer. I made it outside into the cold October night. Falling onto the ground, the door slammed shut behind me. I sat up on the ground and looked at the house. It was pitch black and cold feeling. There were no signs of movement, no crying, no wailing of any kind. It was as if the house was abandoned again. I stood up and began to walk towards the front door, but an eerie feeling came over me, so I backed away. I got into my vehicle and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw the three of them standing at the bedroom window watching me drive away.
And let's take a second to learn a bit about Mr. Hyde's channel. There's so much for you to check out here. I'm talking horror narrations, live streams, fan trailers, reviews, you name it, he's almost certainly done it. Sitting at 338 subs as of this recording and a ton of videos, there's enough content to keep you coming back for years. Subscribe to his channel and make sure you follow him on Twitter at TheGeekInside71 to keep up to date on everything he's doing. Our next story is Chores, written by TheHorrorHomie and narrated by our vivacious voiceover virtuoso. My mom has been an absolute pain in the butt ever since my dad left. It seems like she just expects me to pick up all the extra slack around the house, but it's harder than it sounds. Normally on school days, I'd get home, do homework, watch TV, and go to bed. Now, I'm lucky if I have time to even get my homework done. And I'm not sure how much longer I can do it. All this work is probably what drove my dad away. I mean, here's a few examples of the chores that are expected of me. Monday's cleaning day. Most people hear cleaning day and they think, no big deal. Well, I'd like to ask those people if they've ever scrubbed their entire house's floor with bleach. A few hours of that, and you're bound to feel your lungs are on fire. Then I had to spray sanitizer on every surface that wasn't cleaned from the first go-around. Tuesday, I overhauled the basement. The horrid smell was nearly impossible to get rid of, but she didn't let me give up. Several hours and mop buckets later, it didn't even smell like the same room. Air freshener could work wonders. Wednesday, I went shopping. Have you ever had to carry multiple 10-pound jugs of garden lye across the biggest store in town? After that workout came the large plastic sheets she requested that I get. My back aches at the memory of carrying the heavy groceries to the car. Thursday came around and it was time to start in the garden. Her instructions had been very specific. By the time I was done digging the pit, the sun had set and my hands were covered in blisters. My arms barely had enough strength to pull me out of the rectangle hole. Friday is when I finally got to relax. Imagine my surprise when the cops interrupted my much-needed rest. I talked to them for a few hours until Mother got home, and then she took care of the problem. Unfortunately, now I have to start everything again. But this time, I'll have to dig a bigger hole. I definitely won't have time to do my homework. TheHorrorHomie has a lot going on their profile, but you'll find scary stories woven in between everything. Posting on r/short scary stories and r/creepypasta and more, there's bound to be something you'll enjoy as you follow this awesome author. Surprise! We may have accidentally reached out to one too many authors for this series, and so our vivacious voiceover virtuoso is putting in overtime. Our final story of the night is Black Sheep, written by TheAverage21 and narrated by you-know-who. Me and my dad have always been different from other people. I think it's weird because we look and act a lot like other people, at least most of the time. I was born in space and have lived in space my entire life. However, when I talk to normal kids, they say they were all born on Earth. I've never been to Earth. I hope I can go there someday. It sounds really cool. Me and my dad constantly go on trips to spaceships and other planets. Whenever I ask him why, he always tells me it's business. My least favorite part is watching the other kids cry as my dad rips and tears through the flesh of their parents. I try to comfort them, but most of them call me a freak and push me away. Dad always gets angry when I ask about Mom. He says he's made lustful mistakes, whatever that means. Another part I don't like about the trips is when people start yelling at each other. I see people getting dragged away and thrown into space. Unlike us, they can't breathe in space. When all the other people are gone and it's just Dad and some other person, he grows his tentacles and slowly rips them apart. He said he enjoys it when humans scream in agony and fear. Sometimes my dad brings a friend of his to do business with him. It's nice when they also have a kid because then I have someone to talk to. Space is kinda scary, and I've seen some pretty scary things. But what scares me the most is when I see ghosts, constantly hearing their cries of pain and misery. Someday, I'll have to do what my dad does, killing humans and destroying families. To be honest, I'm kind of excited. A lot of memes here, and if you couldn't tell from the story, TheAverage21 seems to be a huge fan of Among Us. Another avid poster on r/2sentencehorror, you'll find a number of bite-sized stories to read, as well as some longer stories that have been posted to r/shortscarystories. As always, head on over to their Reddit profile and show your support. And that's gonna wrap things up for us tonight, my darling deviants. Thank you so much to the narrators and authors that lent their talents to this video, and be sure you devour the links in the description to check out each and every one of them. This wouldn't be possible without all of their hard work. Now tomorrow we'll be back again at the same time with more narrators and authors to satiate that horrific appetite of yours. Smash that thumbs up, annihilate that subscribe button, and ring that little bell while you're at it. Until next time, my ghastly gang, stay spooky.